Hello, everyone, and welcome to EDUCAUSE 2016 here in Anaheim, California. We are at the lovely Anaheim Convention Center talking to folks here about the importance of EdTech in higher education. My name is Lisa Dabbs, and I am an adjunct professor at the University of La Verne. I'm also an educational consultant, author, blogger, speaker, and it's my honor and privilege to be here today at the conference in the beautiful ViewSonic booth, talking about something that's very important to me as an adjunct professor and showing ways that we can use the interactive teaching tool, which is this beautiful flat panel display, in our work. So today I'm going to talk just a little bit, actually this afternoon, about the power of encouraging feedback and discussions in our work as educational professors or consultants or those that work in higher ed. So when we talk about engaging discussions, when I'm working with my students, we're talking about what does it look like? So I have colleagues that are excellent academians, but they're very used to being the sage on the stage. They've been doing it for over 25 years. They're accustomed to that way of teaching, and I understand that. But to reach our students where we're at, to reach the students where they are at, we've got to do a bit of shifting. We've got to move out of being the sage on the stage, and we actually have to move. We have to move around. We have to be engaging. So when I ask what does it look like, I would ask you to think about that for yourself. What does it look like when you're teaching in K-12, where I come from? I was a principal for 19 years. We did a lot of things that were engaging. So we can learn a lot in higher ed from our friends in K-12. So feedback, when and how, is important when we're talking about discussions. So peer reviews matter. Here are some of my students at work. I teach a 448 class at La Verne, math for young children, and it's a very interactive class. And when we do that kind of work, working with manipulatives, peer reviews matter. Peer reviews matter because we want to have students talking to one another. We want to have them reviewing their work. My students have to write 6 lesson plans. They have to create a final project, take a midterm, write a paper, and produce 10 mini projects. And along the way, they have to use interactive tools such as math manipulatives to do that. So how are they going to be able to know how they are engaging or attempting to engage younger children if they're not getting feedback? The importance of feedback for me as a professor is good, but when they actually get feedback from peers, it makes a big difference. And let's look a little bit about what the research says about that. So cognitive forces at work in the minds of our students become much more engaged when they're actually getting peer reviews rather than just those from the professor. And I'm going to show you a cool thing that we can do with our tool here. So many of us go to Google Scholar to get information, right? About anything you can think of on the planet in the area of higher ed. But when we do that, sometimes it's hard to read everything or share it with our students. But with a tool like this one, I can easily make things larger. I can zoom in, and if there's something in particular that I want to highlight, I'm able to do it here for my students. And I'm able to do it in a way that's engaging. I could even bring them up and have them do it with me. So the power of peer review and the power of being able to share it with a tool such as this interactive teaching display provides is really cool. So we constantly want to focus on the cognitive processes for our students and then activate that through feedback. So let's look really quickly at 4 key points that research says are important. So good feedback is technically going to equal improved student learning. So not only improve student learning from our perspective as professors, but amongst their peers. So what makes feedback good? Let's look at 4 key points. So We want to be specific, number one. Feedback is a tool for future change. Future change in the things that our students are doing, and maybe even in the things that we're doing as their instructors. So what one thing would bring the most improvement to our students?
Hello, my name is Dr. Gavin Watson, and I'm an educational developer in open learning and educational support at the University of Guelph. You're watching the first in a series of videos that we're calling 5 and 3. What does this mean? Over the next 3 minutes or so, I'm going to give you 5 strategies or suggestions related to the topic of giving good feedback to students. While future 5 and 3 videos will change subjects, you'll always get... If you're interested in further resources related to providing student feedback,
if you allow us to scan your badge, you'll get the whole video integrated with my presentation. But you kind of get the gist. There are a number of things that we can do as professors to support that engagement with students, and that little video tells us a little bit about that. So the second one is make it actionable. So when we're giving feedback, let it be actionable with our students. Let them engage in roundtable discussions. Let them kind of hash out the work that they're doing, the work that comes from us as professors, but then discuss it amongst themselves to see what are things that they might try to do differently next time. And really important, don't spend time as an instructor, as a professor, focusing on what went wrong. That's so demeaning and so tough on our students. Let's try to find ways that we can craft a response or an improvement piece without just focusing on what went wrong. And number 3, make it timely. The worst thing that can happen is that if you're a professor that's teaching 3 or 4 classes, you're not able to get back to your students in a timely manner. Now, you might be fortunate to have a support person, a college aide. As an active professor, I'm not that fortunate. So I have to make sure that my response is timely to my students. And if it's not, my students suffer, and I do too, because I'll get responses from students that say, Professor Dabbs, what happened to the score on my paper? So let's try to focus on making it timely and model that for our students. And then lastly, let's make it respectful. There's nothing worse than finding a paper coming from a professor with a big gigantic red mark, which I know still happens. And likewise, how would a peer feel if they had that same kind of response on a paper or on a project? So we want to focus on, I didn't understand that, can you share it again? Rather than, I didn't understand that, what is that? It didn't make sense to me. So as we look at future solutions...
Hello, my name is Dr. Gavin Watson, and I'm an educational developer in open learning and educational support at the University of Guelph.
So Dr. Gavin talks a little bit about finding future solutions in his video, and it's really helpful. It's even more helpful to share that video with your students to have them begin to learn how to give proper feedback. So it's very important to set the tone for engagement. We need to model the process, and we need to model it well. I can't expect my students to give great peer feedback if I haven't done the work of being a good modeler. So I arrange my classroom to facilitate discussions. My students are not in rows like in the 1950s. They're seated in round table discussions, and I try to use a little bit of social media.
Let's suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague.
So that gives you a bit of a snapshot as to why incorporating social media into feedback and discussions is important. And learn to be the guide on the side. So again, if you get a copy of my presentation, you'll get that embedded video and you'll get to see a little bit more. So I want to thank you so much for being here, and I want to thank you for listening to my presentation. And I hope that you're as excited as I am about the idea of using a beautiful flat panel display, an interactive teaching tool to engage your students. Now, if you are on social media, I would love you to connect with me. Twitter is my favorite place to be. And if you're brave enough to be on Instagram like I am, I would love to have you connect with me on Instagram. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference.